Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, we just finished our series of examinations of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and the resurrection. By the way, thank you so very much for all of the kind remarks about that study. I hope it's been a blessing to you. Okay, I urged you to send me your suggestions for some brief studies, some some studies that we could take just a few videos and really look at them sufficiently to answer your questions. I have received several such recommendations. We're going to begin that this morning with one of them. And by far, the number of requests for me to begin a study of the Olivet Discourse has far outstripped any other request. And so, that's going to be an involved study. I'm not going to predict how many videos, just not going to do that, but it will be an involved study. But in the meantime, as suggested, I've received some really disturbing emails and requests from people who are obviously deeply disturbed by the world events around us and the claims that are being made on YouTube and radio and what have you, that we're in the last days. Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Here we are Tuesday. I've already received an email this week from an individual telling me that Donald Trump is the man of sin. He is even now working on a peace treaty with Israel. Folks, look, every American president has sought to find peace in the Middle East. It doesn't mean they're the Antichrist. And it doesn't mean Donald Trump is the Antichrist. But when we come to a study of the man of sin, the key passage, the singular passage that addresses this in depth is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. By the way, if you want to hear William Bell and me discuss the man of sin in depth, then go to fulfilldradio.com and look up the series that we did on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. You're going to find a wealth of material there that will be extremely helpful to you. All right. Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 discusses the man of sin. Like I said, this is the key passage on it. If 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 doesn't predict our day, our time, Donald Trump, if it doesn't address him or talk about him, then no passage does. This is the text right here. Well, here's an amazing thing. Paul wrote to the church at Thessalonica, and he said, "Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ," that's the Greek word parousia, the word coming, "and our gathering together to him, I urge you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had already come." Pardon me. Wait a minute. Had come? Had already come? Is present? That's the way the majority of translations render it, and properly so. Those translations, the King James, American Standard, one or two others, three or four others perhaps, that render this as, don't let anyone convince you that the day of the Lord is just at hand. I'm sorry, those are improper translations. But here's the point. They believed the day of the Lord had already come. Folks, listen to me. If the day of the Lord is the day of the rapture, they believe the rapture had already taken place. Or, if the day of the Lord is the second coming, in the dispensational paradigm, there's a difference between rapture and second coming. If they believe the second coming was the day of the Lord, they believe it had already come. What? How in the world is that possible? How could anyone believe the day of the Lord had already come? Okay, got to move on. Notice that Paul says, that day. Now, in the Greek, it is literally that, which means the antecedent is our gathering and his parousia. In other words, it's a singular event. They're not looking for the day of the Lord and then at another time, the rapture. They're looking and believing in the day of the Lord, which is the time of the rapture, if you want to use the word rapture, which is not a biblical word. And Paul says that event of the gathering, that event of the day of the Lord, will not come except there first come the apostasia, the apostasy, and the man of sin. Now, first of all, let me point out that Jesus in the Olivet Discourse predicted the apostasy for his generation. In Matthew 24, 9 to 12, Jesus said false teachers would come and deceive many. And he said the love of the many would grow cold. And as the New American Standard Translation renders it, the love of the majority would grow cold. Jesus was saying that the apostasy of the majority of believers would take place in the first century. That is incredible. So, whatever this apostasy is, it is an event that Jesus said was to occur in the first century. Now, by the way, the apostasy was already beginning to take place when Paul wrote, because writing in AD 49, 50 at the outside latest, writing to the Galatians, Paul said, I marvel that you are so soon removed from him who called you unto grace, unto another gospel, which is not another gospel, but there are some who would trouble you. In other words, the apostasy was already starting to take hold. Paul was not talking about far future events. Secondly, Paul said the man of sin must come. I'm well aware of the fact that virtually every single generation believes and points to some individual in their generation. I mean, after all, Hitler was the man of sin. Mussolini was the man of sin. Ronald Reagan was the man of sin. Even Jimmy Carter was the man of sin. And now Donald Trump is the supposed man of sin. Now ask yourself the question. If the man of sin was to appear before the day of the Lord, as Paul clearly teaches, and they believed that the day of the Lord was already there, then somewhere, somehow, in their intellectual process, they believed, or they had to believe, the man of sin had already been revealed. Now, Paul's reminding them, folks, of what he had taught them when he was with them before. This is not new information. Is Paul having to remind them? Absolutely. Had they known this at one time? Positively. So, it staggers the mind to think that the Thessalonians believed that the day of the Lord had already come, but had to be reminded that the man of sin had not yet been fully manifested. How could they forget such a thing? Well, I don't know, to be honest about it. I simply do not know how they could lose track of that incredibly important fact, but they had. And so Paul has to remind them that the day of the Lord hasn't come. How do I know the day of the Lord hasn't come, Paul would say? Because the man of sin hasn't been revealed. Now notice what Paul doesn't say. He doesn't say the man of sin is not alive. How many times have you heard Hal Lindsey said it? The man of sin was alive somewhere in Europe in the 1980s. How many times do we hear dispensationalists say, oh, the man of sin is around. He's alive somewhere. And then, of course, oh, Donald Trump is the man of sin. Sorry, folks, doesn't work. Now, in tomorrow's video, we're going to take a real close look at what Paul has to say about the man of sin, where he would appear, whether or not he was alive then, or whether Paul was looking for him in the far distant future. I want to suggest to you that when we look at the text, the context of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, it absolutely falsifies these hundreds, perhaps thousands of YouTube videos, all of which are saying, oh my goodness, we're in the last days, Donald Trump is the man of sin. No, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump, I don't care if you like him, I don't care if you don't like him. He is not the man of sin. And we will prove that on the flip side. See you there.